Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host Jacob Shorba, and today we'll be embarking on our mock draft 4.0 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll be uploading these drafts every Thursday all the way up until the 2023 NFL Draft, so go ahead and just consider this a tradition. We're going to be doing this for a while. We're going to have a lot of these. Eventually we'll probably get into the teens as far as how many of these have been done. But this is a nice way for us to be able to learn about prospects, to put ourselves in different positions, consider who you would pick over another, really just get to talk about the draft. And so that's why we're doing this. Plus, I just love it. I love drafting and I love the whole process. And I'm excited to hopefully go to the NFL draft since I live so close to Kansas City. Don't be jealous of that, by the way. It's not that fun up here. It's more fun in Jacksonville. I can tell you that from being in both areas. So, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into this. Now, I want to talk about trades before this starts. Ideally, you want to be the team trading back, right? Or you just don't want to trade up. You don't want to give up capital. If we have a really good player fall down the board that makes sense to trade up for, then we'll look to make a move. So that will be in consideration depending on who's available. And then another thing to throw out there, if there's an obvious scenario where we could trade back, say for example, a team like the Panthers, they haven't taken a quarterback, and we're sitting at 24 with like Anthony Richardson on the board, then we can make a trade for their selection. There's going to be some options like that, so we'll see if we move. It's possible, but ideally we're not going to give up any extra capital, and we're going to find the best player available at these selections. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we'll be going pick by pick. Probably going to go to around 14 or 15, evaluate the board, see if there's anyone big that's fallen. If there's a really big name, we could consider moving up, but it's unlikely. So, a lot of quarterbacks already off the board there. And we're at 14. So at this point, there's no one I would trade this far up for. Don't think that would be a great idea. So we're going to keep moving. Brian Bresee could be a pick that would make some sense for Jacksonville if he falls this far. He is not a player I would trade up for. I don't think that's a smart move. We're going to keep moving. He might be off the board. He is not. Okay. We've got a very difficult decision to make here. Because at this point, there's about 3 players I would consider. And so those players would be Brian Bresee, Brian Branch, a lot of Brians, and O'Cyrus Torrence. So we'll talk about what they add. Brian Bresee is going to be very likely a risky pick in the first round. And that's why you're probably not going to see a team select him really early on. And the reason why he's risky is because at the college level, he never really put it all together. There's concern about whether he's going to live up to the hype, which could be almost as good as Jalen Carter. Not as good, but almost as good. Or is he going to be a bust? Is this another Taven Bryan pick? That's probably going to be the huge concern that comes to people. And so I don't think he's the ideal selection, even though he's really the last defensive lineman for the interior that you could be super confident in. So he's an option here. Now, Brian Branch is another player that would make a ton of sense for Jacksonville because he fits that slot corner need. He's a really good addition there. He played an entire year in that role, was fantastic, really did everything you could ask of him. He would just be a home run for that pick. And he will likely be off the board earlier, so he can make sense for a selection. Now, the other guy, and maybe if you want, you could throw Keely Ringo into this, and I would have said Cam Smith, but he's off the board. O'Cyrus Torrence is our third guy. Honestly, my favorite out of the three. Osiris Torrance, I believe he's going to be a very good guard in the NFL. And not only can he play guard, but if you need him to, he can be your swing tackle. So, if the team moves on from Juwan Taylor and they picked up Torrance, they don't have to be super concerned about the swing tackle spot because you can move Torrance out to right tackle. That can be a move you make, and either Walker Little or Cam would be at left, whoever's not injured, right? So, Torrance makes a ton of sense. He's got the size, he's got the prototypical build. He's went up against really great talent moving to Florida. So this is something we'll take a look at here. He played for, I believe it was the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. The fantastic name, right? Oh, we don't need snaps by position. We'll go offense. We're going to look at his grades each year. This is what's crazy. These years are going up against talent that is worse when you're playing for the Raging Cajuns, right? But after that, when he moved to Florida, and he's going up against the likes of Jalen Carter, he's got an 88 still for his grade. He was not a worse player. He played just as good. So you're talking about a guard that's battle-tested, that's gone up against the best, because Jalen Carter will be one of the best defensive interior prospects and players in the NFL. He's found success. He was not perfect, but you saw plays where he was the dominant guy of those two. He was often able to kick Jalen Carter out of the game. And so, maybe a hot take here, I would value him more than both Brian Bresee and Brian Branch. And I like Brian Branch a lot. He's really close for me. But I also think that it would make sense to go after a corner later in the draft, specifically the second round. Because I think you will have, hopefully, someone available there that makes sense. And you look at the options as well that will probably fall that far, those being, say, Tyreek Stevenson or Deonte Banks. Two players we actually talked about earlier this week. Both of those players fit what Jacksonville wants to do. They're both man corners. They play press coverage well. They're physical. They're really good selections at that point. And very valuable selections too. And if we need to, we could trade up if corners are flying off the board. So I still think you can get a guy to develop. And we were talking before about how we don't want to be forced into just picking one position, right? But I still think that this team should try to get a cornerback in the draft. I think getting another young guy makes a ton of sense. So we're going to do what I want to do here. Maybe it's not the right choice, but I'm going to go Osiris Torrance. We're going to complete that offensive line. We're going to up the value for the run game because Torrance is a mauler in the run game. You want to get ETN going, you want to make your offense two-dimensional, go pick Osiris Torrance. Makes a ton of sense for this team. Now, we're going to go pick by pick. And, oh man, that's good if Saquon Barkley isn't there. And Brian Bresee falling down the board still. He'll probably go soon. Yep, and to Kansas City, of course. So now we're in the second round. We're going to keep going pick by pick for a little bit. There's some names here we could consider. And we will not select cornerback if there is a really good player available that should be taken instead. And now, at that position, Tyreek Stevenson is the top candidate. We also got Deonte Banks down here. Those would be the two players I would be confident selecting at 56. So we're going to start moving through. Now, at this point, DeJuan Jones has fallen really far. I don't know how much value he has to you at this point because you've already hit your offensive line. That would be still a smart pick for the long term, but I don't think I would go that direction. I would not trade up for that. So we're still going through these picks. Jones has fallen really far. That would be really tempting most of the time, I'll tell you that. But we're not going to go that direction here. Yeah, Steelers just absolutely killed their draft. Broderick Jones, DeJuan Jones. Here we are at our selection. So guys you could consider at the top of the board. Derek Hall could make sense as an edge, has good size for the position. Jacksonville could fall in love with him. Luke Musgrave, also a fantastic tight end prospect for the team to consider. Profiles really close to Philadelphia Eagles tight ends that Doug Peterson worked with pretty well. Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert. Obviously, Ertz isn't there any longer, but he was there while Doug Peterson was for a lot of his time. That's another smart selection here. John Michael Schmitz, maybe you look at him as a guard, and he could fit into the team that way. Chris Smith is another player I really like. I think he would be a really good safety. I don't think he'd be a bad selection, but we're going to go with Tyreek Stevenson. I do think, genuinely, out of this entire board, that he could be the most valuable player. He's an extremely physical player for one. He's going to play in the slot for you right off the bat. He plays press coverage well. He's a man corner. He's going to have the upside to play outside if you move on from Darius Williams or you have an injury. It's a very smart pick for all those reasons. Now, he's going to be able to come in as well against the run, which is another thing you're going to ask for from your slot corners. And maybe he's going to help you with tight ends. With his physicality, he's going to be a bigger guy. Still moves around well. You're going to like all that about him. And so he's our selection here. And really, for me, unless someone falls, this is my ideal first 2 rounds of the draft. Now, what I'm looking to do after this, I'm looking at either edge or wide receiver, as in Xavier Hutchinson. But there's some good edge prospects still on the board, specifically Derek Hall and Will McDonald. So we're going to keep moving pick by pick. See Deonte Banks off the board. Here goes top guys. I think you could consider trading up for McDonald if he keeps falling. I'm not sure that he does, though. Just being the top edge. And I think he goes around this range. But he would be, of course, it's always the Titans. It's always those damn Titans, I swear. Yeah, we're just going to move straight to our pick, I think. Chris Smith off the board. We've got 4 more selections. All right, now we're on the board. So this is a clear selection to me still. I would have liked Will McDonald. I think he's a great fit here. And if you went cornerback in the first round, I think you're probably looking at McDonald in the second round. That would be a very valuable pick if he falls. But at this point, I'm getting Xavier Hutchinson. We've hit offensive line. We've upgraded that spot. We've got, obviously, our starting running back. The offense, really what it needs at this point is depth guys who are younger that can develop. And on the defensive side of the ball, you could look to address your pass rush just, quite frankly, through free agency. Maybe you don't need to hit it in the draft. You would like to. You would like to get a Will McDonald, but it's not a necessity. You don't absolutely have to because you already have a lot of guys that will probably return or are already on the roster that have a ton of potential and will be better once the coverage gets better. At least that's what I hope, right? So we're going to get a guy that you can develop and fits in really well for a player who's probably going to be leaving this team. So Marvin Jones is probably not going to be back with Jacksonville unless he wants to win a Super Bowl and take a pay cut. I don't think he's going to be back. I think he's going to start on another team. And it's going to probably be a rebuilding team. Because I think he's good enough to do that. I think he can absolutely do it. You saw him get 800-something yards last season. And then this year, he got, I think, around 500-something. Not as good, but he's still getting decent production. And he's going to be valuable to a team. So he could earn more money somewhere else, for sure. So we're going to go with Xavier Hutchinson because Hutchinson is very similar to what you're going to lose with Marvin Jones. He's a contested catch guy, big body. He has the size to be a very physical receiver. He can play outside, so you're not going to confine him to the slot. However, say that Christian Kirk goes down, or you just want to run different formations, you want to move Kirk outside, you can put Xavier Hutchinson in the slot. He can operate as a big slot receiver like Keenan Allen does. And that's something that's very valuable. A versatile receiver, fills in for anyone who goes down, just gives you more on your offense with what you're doing. And what's great about Hutchinson as well, it's a feel-good story. He's from Jacksonville. That's where he was born. That's where he was raised. And what better story than a guy like that coming home to be a long-term starter on this team? Because I think you get that in the long term. Say that Zay Jones doesn't work out this next year, just isn't as good as what you want. If Xavier Hutchinson is just about as good as him or better, you can move on from Zay. It would suck, but that's possible, right? Maybe Calvin Ridley even has problems, or he demands so much money that the team can't re-sign him. That's all possible, right? Like, we could have changes to the receiving corps after this next year. Probably not. I think they'll keep him around, but it's possible. So we're going to get Xavier Hutchinson because even if all three of those guys stick around for a few years, you have a fantastic guy to rotate in and use. And so that's a really valuable pick at this point. Now we're going to go ahead and we're just going to skip to the next selection. We haven't made any trades, which is good. We haven't given up any huge value. One name I saw fly off the board that kind of hurt, Wanya Morris. Would have been a nice guy to develop on the offensive line, but we don't got to select that. We got Osiris Torrance. We got our swing tackle, if you see him that way, that is. Now, if we didn't hit wide receiver, Dontavian Wicks would have been a really nice guy to get, especially with him developing on the team. The main issue with him is drops, but he could be a really nice, third receiver on a team. One of the better ones in the league. And that's what this team is really going to need at the receiver position, especially if they move on from one of these guys. But we got that in Hutchinson. I think here, I don't want to scroll too far down. You could look perhaps at Zach Pickens would be a valuable pick, give you some interior presence on the defense. That's probably the direction we're going to go. And so we'll take a look at his profile just so you get an idea of him. And he's also a guy I got to remind myself on. So, reasons to buy him. Physical traits, pass down ability, which is what we need. Block deconstruction. And then all these things that can be worked out. Not saying they will, but things you can develop. And so this makes sense as a 4th round selection. You've got the size, you got the physical traits. You're going to get a guy like this. And now you have a potential answer on the defensive line to just make things a little better. Now, maybe the team addresses this in free agency. Maybe they go after a Calais Campbell. That would be amazing. I would love that. I might go buy a jersey even. Because I love Calais. He's a great player. I'd be so thrilled if he got to win a Super Bowl here, but maybe that's not realistic, right? So we're going to get defensive line presence, and we're probably looking at running back at this point with our next selection. Kenny McIntosh would have been very enticing, fantastic receiving threat from the running back position. However, as a blocker, he's not going to be that effective. He's not going to be a guy you can put on passing downs like that unless he's a receiver. So the defense is going to know what's happening if he's on the field a lot of the time. So at this point, once again, Dontavian Wicks would have been nice, but Hutchinson was selected. Not really a spot for Wicks. Roschon Johnson is going to be our selection. So Roschon Johnson, he's the backup running back to Bijan Robinson. in Texas for the Longhorns, and any running back that's not Bijan Robinson would be a backup to Bijan Robinson in the college game right now. Just being honest, right? And Roschon Johnson, he's got the physical profile to do it. He's a receiving threat for that team, and as well, he's a great blocker. He is a huge upgrade at that. So you're going to help yourself on passing downs. You're going to have a guy who can really do whatever you ask from him on a passing down. And you also get a strong complement to Travis Etienne that has just simply a different skill set. So that's a really logical pick, and for me, probably my favorite running back pick at this point. So this is where we sit before we get late in the draft, before we start taking some shots on players. We've got a guard. We've upgraded our offensive line. So now we're feeling really confident in that unit. We've got a receiver as well to throw in that we can develop. We've got a second running back, someone who's going to complement Etienne. So the offense looks really good. The only thing we haven't hit is getting another tight end. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we've got our slot corner, someone who's versatile, fits the scheme well, can develop great. And then we've also hit our defensive line with Zach Pickens, a lot of upside, physical profile to do it. And I think, quite frankly, I know where we're going with the next selection, but we'll see how the board falls. And we will be trading this pick to the Falcons. The reason why is the Calvin Ridley trade. Once he's reinstated, Calvin Ridley will have his compensation for this season move from a 6th rounder to a 5th rounder. So we get our 6th rounder back that the Falcons currently own, and they get our 5th. So this is not going to be our selection at the end of the day. So we'll go ahead. We will skip to the next pick. And we'll see how this board falls. See if there's anyone really nice. So Luke Schoonmaker. Josh Wiley. Obvious choices there. However, here's a guy who's really low on here. Payne Durham. He was someone who's kind of stood out, I believe, at the Senior Bowl. Really could be one of these diamonds in the rough this late in the draft. And so, well, you could get something in both of these players. We're going to take a shot here at upside. We're going to do that with Payne Durham. Can really offer you everything as a tight end. The question is, will he turn into a good player at the NFL level? And maybe he's not available at this point, because I don't think he's at 300 for sure. But that's our selection. Probably looks disgusting, right? Because of how lowly ranked he is. Maybe you get him later in the draft. But we're still going to go that direction here. Still makes sense at this point in the draft. And I think you could argue he's better than the top of the board. And you always pick best player available, right? So let's move to the next one. So, at this point of the draft, I might go for O'Shawn Mathis. Because once again, we're going to be going after players who have the physical upside that could develop into impact guys. That's really what we're looking at. Unless there is a great player who's fallen this far, that should not be here. For example, Jamari Sawyer last year should not have been available as late as he was. It was quite frankly insane with how late he went. And he ended up being drafted by the Chargers. He was a guard. They moved him to tackle even, and he was a decent tackle. Which is crazy, right? Just absolutely nuts. But that's what happens sometimes. And so if there was a player on the board that fit the profile for that, we would go that direction. We're going to go O'Shawn Mathis. We're going to get an edge here. Get someone to help out the pass rush a little bit. More as a developmental guy. So might not have any impact the first year, but you're still adding to that room. So we'll go to the next pick. We, at this point, might go Trevor Reed, get a tackle. He's got a little bit of versatility to play in different positions, so maybe he moves to guard. But you get another developmental guy, someone we've went to before as well. So we'll go that direction. Go to our next pick. This will be the one to close it out. At this point, you could consider a backup quarterback. Could also go kicker. But what we're going to do, if he's on the board, we'll see that here in a moment. That's it. I think he's gone, actually. We would have went Michael Wilson at this point. Senior Bowl standout at the receiver position. A lot of upside. That would have been the pick, but he's gone. So we're going to go a different way. I think here, might just draft from the top of the board. Let's just add to the defensive line again. Go Kobe Turner. Maybe you get something there. Maybe you don't. It's the 7th round of the draft. We're taking a shot. So we'll go ahead. We'll wrap this up and review this draft. And I probably say this every time because my opinions change, and I like certain things some weeks, other weeks I don't. But for me, I think this is one of the best drafts we've had. I think you get the best player on the board in the first round. And if, say, Brian Bresee works out really well at defensive line, then they're on the defensive line. Sure, that might be a better pick. But O'Cyrus Torrence should be gone by this point. Very valuable prospect. Offers a ton to your offensive line in the exact way you need it. You struggled against Chris Jones. You struggled to get your running game going at points in the season where you absolutely needed it. Make your offense two-dimensional. Give yourself a guy who can stand up to really good interior pass rushers, and you get that with O'Cyrus Torrence. And you get him from Florida, too, which some people will love. So that's a good selection in the first round. The second round, went after Tyreek Stevenson. Got ourselves a cornerback, someone who can play in the slot, very physical, has size that's crazy for the position with his weight, his strength. You love all that with him. And I think if you get him in the second round, that is a home run pick at that point of the draft. Could also go with a Will McDonald. Another route they could go for the defense. But I would argue that cornerback would be the smarter way to go, the more valuable way to go, because I think that's going to have a huge impact on your pass rush. Because you don't really have the speed rushers on the team right now, and so they need a little more time. And if your secondary is bad, there's always a place to throw it. And they threw it on us all season long, especially to the slot later on in the year. And it was outside before that, till Darius Williams went there. So we hit the last need in the secondary, and you've solved two big problems for this team. Run blocking, your issue with Chris Jones, and then second, your cornerback spot. You get your third guy. Now we go after Xavier Hutchinson. We get someone we can develop as a fourth receiver. Brings in a skill set that this offense would lose in Marvin Jones. Has more upside. Just really valuable selection at this point. Could be a starting receiver for you that you value a lot on this team for years to come. Then we go after Zach Pickens. We get an interior pass rusher, someone who's got to be developed a little bit, but a valuable pick at this point. You get someone to add to that position that could provide a little boost, and you're going to like that. Roschon Johnson. We got a pass blocking running back. We got someone who can receive, add that element to the running back position, which quite frankly, Travis Etienne should be getting used more in that role. He's not though. So we add that. We hit tight end late. We get a guy who could have really nice upside, could end up being solid in the NFL, or maybe he's just a bust, but it's the 6th round of the draft. We're taking shots at this point. We went after O'Shawn Mathis, throwing an edge player, someone you can develop there along with Jordan Smith. We got Trevor Reed, developmental offensive tackle, has a little bit of versatility, gives you another depth piece to the team, and we ended it with another defensive lineman to throw on. So, overall, I think it's a really good draft, the way everything panned out. I think if I could have asked for anything to be different, perhaps I would have wanted Will McDonald to fall into the third round to our selection. I don't think that's realistic, but that would have been nice. And as far as things that you didn't really get to hit, I mean, I think the offensive side of the ball, you hit every need that you have, other than if you're talking about like backup quarterback. And I don't think that's a huge deal because if Trevor Lawrence goes down, all hell's breaking loose, right? Like, we're going to be a little worried about that more. We're not talking Super Bowl as much. But hey, we got Doug Peterson as their head coach, so maybe I'm wrong. So on the offensive side of the ball, offensive line gets a big boost. You get a depth tight end that you need, someone who could develop into something solid. You get a perfect complementary running back, and you get a receiver that develops and fills the role of Marvin Jones, could be a starter long term. So the offensive side of the ball we got to hit really well. On the defense, we get our slot corner, a really good one, someone who has the versatility to be outside in the future, fits exactly what Mike Caldwell is going to want on the defense. And on the defensive line, we hit Zach Pickens. We get an interior pass rusher, not an all-world beater one, but someone who adds to that room, that has upside, that could be a really nice selection and addition for this team down the road. We also go to Sean Mathis, just to add another edge rusher that we can develop with Jordan Smith. And those are your notable additions. So what did we really miss? I mean, I guess you could wish you got a really great interior pass rusher or a really great edge. Those are probably the two things I would mention. However, I think there are already the pieces here, especially if certain guys are re-signed, for the pass rush to be great next year, just with improvements to the secondary and more time in the system. I could absolutely see that happening. So this could be a draft where you really didn't miss anything. And for me, like I said, it's definitely one of my favorites. So I appreciate you watching this, appreciate you joining us, and if you've got any ideas, once again, for what you want to see on the channel, let me know. Definitely open to it. What we want to know right now, especially during the off season where there's more time that's not really got a whole lot of NFL news going on, we want to know what you guys are looking for, what you want to talk about, so don't be afraid to mention that. So with that said, I appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Jags.